Hello again. When we finished up the second section of the financial report, we were looking at the additional information about summer reading and about how your library uses state aid. So now we're going to get to the end of the report and your state aid application. So if you go to the next section, application and compliance form. So this is the information that we need to get from you to figure out if you've met all of the requirements for state aid and therefore can become certified. So the first thing you're going to see is the municipal appropriation requirement worksheet. So the MAR, the municipal appropriation requirement, is the minimum amount that your municipality has to give your library in order to be certified. And so what we have here is what your FY21 calculation figure was and whether or not you were certified, your FY22 calculation figure and whether or not you were certified, and then your FY23 figure. And then we're going to figure out whether or not you are able to be certified for this year. And so what's going to happen is it's going to pull your FY23 MAR from your last year's report. And then it's going to also pull in your FY23 TAMI that you submitted on this form. So this would be that first section of the income, the municipal appropriation. So the requirement is hopefully less than what you actually got. And that's what's being calculated here. So for MU8, you enter whichever is higher, your FY23 MAR on MU5, which is here, or the TAMI on MU7, which is here and which is what you reported on this form. So you're actually going to type this in. And then it's going to do the math for you. So the calculation of your MAR is based on a continuity of effort. So the commissioners want to see that the library services are being supported year after year, and that's built in a small increase over 3 years. So what we do is we take the average of your 3 prior years. So this would be MU1 was FY21 plus FY22 plus FY23's TAMI. You use whichever is higher. So there's your 3 together. You divide by 3 to get your average. And then you multiply by 1.025 or by 2.5% to get your MAR for FY24. And then this is also pulling in your FY24 projected TAMI. So what you had in your town meeting or city council in the spring. And hopefully this number is higher than this number so that you can sort of see into the future that you'll be certified next year. Then the next section is the compliance period, hours and weeks open. So your hours open, it's going to say what your hours open standard is, what your days open standard is. And then it's also going to, this is where you would put in how many are actually open. There is a category here where it pulls in the information for if you meet 90% compliance and if you need an accommodation. Hours open per week, days open, evenings open. And this is the number of evenings, not the hours open. Then it's going to pull in the information that we have on who is the director. And then if you had an acting director or an interim director at some point during the year, or if you had a different director at some point during the year, you put that information here. And then the next section is the materials expenditure requirement worksheet. So this is where this pulls in your appropriated municipal income, the total, the TAMI for FY23. It reduces it by whatever you benefits that you paid out of the library's budget, so that tuition or mileage or whatever. So that gives that total. And then it puts in what your expenditure standard is. So for this town, it's 15%. And then it's going to do the math for you. So it's going to say 15% of this amount is $86,031, basically. Then it gives you a calculation for 90%. So if you don't meet the full amount, you can still qualify for state aid if you meet 90%. And so that's what that number is. Then this is pulling in what you actually spent. So your materials expenditure is here, will show up here. What you spent from your library operating budget, and then what you spent in what your friends and foundations spent on your behalf, and then what you spent on technology for direct patron use. And so those are all what was in the expenditure section, part 1, and then total materials. So it's going to total that up for you. So all libraries must meet their full materials requirement or the 90% for a reduced amount. Now, there is a process where you can apply for flexibility if you are open another tier's hours. And so I'm going to show you that section here. So under regulations and standards, these are the different rules here. And so your hours open per week, there is a chart here. And so it's based on your population. So if you have between 5,000 and 9,999 people, you're required to be open 25 hours, any number of days, and include some evening hours. And then the larger your community, the more number of hours you are required to be open. Then if you go to the materials expenditure, it's a similar chart, but the percentage is flipped. So if you are one of our largest libraries, you have to do the smallest percentage for materials. And then so for this example, the 5,000 to almost 10,000 has to spend 19% on their materials. Now, if you are open a higher tier's number of hours, so if you have, say, 7,500 people in your town, but you're open 40 hours a week, you can spend that 40 hours a week amount. So instead of spending 19% of your appropriation on materials, you can spend 16. And that difference is to help with the cost of running a library more hours, which requires a higher staff load. Now, if you decide to do this, you need to request flexibility. So we have a document here. So it's a notification of request for flexibility. And it's just a form that you fill out and you send that in with the rest of your documents. So I'm just gonna pull this open. Whoops. Yeah, here we go. So we're going to fill this in. So it's going to be your municipality's name, the signature of the library director, the signature of the trustee, and then you're going to put how much you were actually open and how much you actually spent. And then this compliance form will go to Wait GNG with your budget documentation and your certification form for your application. And here's that chart again. So if you are in one of these tiers, higher level, if you go into one of the higher levels, you can do that level's number of percentage for the materials. There's no problem with doing this. It's totally okay to do it. It's helpful to your library and your community. So there's no penalty for doing that. If you don't meet 100% of your hours or 100% of your materials, but you can meet 90%, you can still receive state aid, but it will be a reduced amount. And that's called accommodation to help libraries get there if you can get to 90%. There is no waiver of those requirements. With the MAR, if you don't meet your requirement, you can apply for a waiver. And that is a separate process that we can walk you through at another time. Materials expenditure requirement, we went through that. And then next. So next is the submission process. So you see submission process here and then submission process here. It's really important that you read through this. I'm going to just move this over here. Okay. So before you submit your state aid application and compliance form, make sure you click on show status. So up here is show status. And when you click on this, it's really handy because it pulls up all of your edit checks, all of your unanswered questions, and all of your flagged questions. So for edit checks, this will be when you've made an error, or if you've left something blank, or if your numbers are drastically different. It's going to say, here's the problem. And then it's going to say, check on your current year for an error, or if it's correct, provide an explanation for the change. And then it's going to tell you where to put it. So it wants either a federal note, and see, here's a federal note, and here's a federal note. And occasionally it will say a state note. And so that's just right here, federal note, state note, federal note, state note. Feel free to write one note and copy it and paste it in both. And if you find out that you're not being allowed to submit, go and check to make sure that you've done it in the right field. Then we have some unanswered questions here. And I'm going to just flag a couple of these so you can see them on the next section. So you can go in and just answer these from this section if you don't want to go back through the navigation section and go page by page. And then flagged questions is handy. Oh, I didn't save those, so I'm going to go back. If I had done the flagged questions in the right section, they would show up here, and then you could go in and answer them right from this box. Now there aren't any here, so you're all set with this section, but I'm going to go back to my survey. All right. And so after you've done show status, if you're ready to submit, there's going to be a list. So there's going to say edit checks, and then a green check mark, unanswered questions, green check mark, flagged questions, green check mark. And then it will say submit underneath that. And that way, you know, you're all set when those three are done. But before you do that, make sure you print out your compliance form. And so this is the document that you need to send in with your budget documentation and with your request for flexibility if you need to do that. And this is basically just a print version of what the form is that you filled out here. So it's the same categories. So let me move my face again. Great. So Abington, who filled out the survey, title, their email address, best days and times to reach. That's important info. So if we need to come back to you with a problem, library director signature, trustee chair signature, submission date and info. Then it's the compliance form for the municipal appropriation requirement. So here's FY21, your figure, whether or not you were certified, your FY22 figure, certified, FY23, the figure, whether or not you were certified, and then your TAMI. And then you're going to enter whichever is higher here. Then it's showing you the calculations for your next year's MAR. So that's what's here. Then here's information. So if line 12, MU12, if your TAMI is less than MU8, your MAR, you did not meet your municipal appropriation requirement, and you have to file for a waiver. And there's details about doing that here. And then here's the other requirements. So you're open to all residents. You can't charge for normal library services. You have to be open a minimum number of hours a week. So here's where it tells you, and here's what your chart will say, or the chart will say your hours. Then employ trained library personnel. There are requirements for the directors, so that will be here. And then here is the materials expenditure requirement worksheet. And so here's the municipal income, 15%. Here's the dollar amount. And then in this situation, when she's done entering all this info, it will populate here. So your library's operating expenses, your friends and foundations, if what they've spent for you, technology for direct patron use, and then it will total it up. And so you want this number to be higher than this number. And then you are required to lend books to other libraries in the Commonwealth and report your non-resident circulation. So this is your application and compliance form. So you'll print that out and you'll get it signed. And then when you're all done, when you've done the submit, when you've printed out your compliance form, you can go ahead and hit submit, and this locks your form. If you submit too soon, which many people do, so don't worry about it, just email me or Weichi and we can unlock it for you. We may not be right on the computer right when you're doing it, so just be aware it might take us, a little bit to get back to you and open that up. Then here's information. So you're going to scan these to Weichi. So it's the application and compliance form, which is here. And it's the budget documentation, which is going to prove your appropriation in the spring. And you're going to send those two things to Weichi. And if you need flexibility, you can send those to Weichi as well. And then that's really it. That will be your application for state aid. The process after that is that Mary Rose and I go through every single library's forms and make sure you've met the requirements. We go over your documentation to make sure that your numbers match. If there are any problems, you go to the bottom of the pile because we need to get as many libraries as possible done basically by mid-October to be ready for the November commissioners meeting. At the November commissioners meeting, people who are done first with no errors will be the first people to be certified. And so they'll get their first payment in November. And then we have another meeting in December and January where the remaining folks will be certified. And if you need accommodation, you will be last on the list, accommodation of the hours or materials budget. So it is good for you to get it done earlier and being completely done, because that will get you sooner on the list. So good luck getting everything done, and feel free to reach out with any questions. Thanks. Have a great day.